Good morning, Moray Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Berachot, and we are on Daf Chaf Zayin Amud Aleph 27a, 9 lines from the bottom. And the Limud of Amud Yomi, Chodesh Elul, has been sponsored by Dr. Aaron and Charlene Kahen for the health and happiness and success of their children. And Leilu Nishmat Nisan Ben Moshe HaKohen, that is Neshama Shtav and Aliyah. Amen. Also sponsored by Justin and Sarah Zarabi for the health and prosperity of Sarah Rachel Bad Nora, and also Ezra Haim Ben Deborah, that should have full recovery. Amen. The entire month of Elul's learning and inspirations of KBT has been sponsored by Dr. and Mrs. Shaye for health and prosperity of their family, and Nahat from their children. Aliyah B'Torah should have much Nahat from all their children. Amen. We are in the middle of a sugya that we started yesterday, whether or not halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to plag hamincha, or halacha is like Rabbanan when it comes to plag hamincha. We mentioned that there are different points of time that different Tanaim see as night and day, and Rabbi Yehuda holds already from an hour and 15 minutes before sunset is already considered halachic night. We call that plag hamincha, which means if you have the 2.5 hours, which is the later time of mincha, the half of that, plag means half, and half of that is considered basically a time of arvit, meaning the nightfall really starts. Nightfall starts from already plag hamincha. If you have and this is going to become relevant now, if this is the 12th hour, which means nightfall, sunset, right? This is the 12th hour, and this is the 9.5 hour. So this 2.5 hours, when you half it, that is considered plag hamincha. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is already night. According to Rabbanan, Chachamim, this is broad daylight. If you ask them, can you say Arvit in this time? Say absolutely not, because still day. Rabbi Yehuda says you could start Arvit already from here. Can you say Mincha according to Rabbi Yehuda here? Absolutely not. It's night. According to Rabbanan, you could. So the Gemara went back and forth. What is the halacha? And the Gemara says we don't have a clear. This is a very strange Gemara, unprecedented so far. The Gemara says we don't have a clear answer. Therefore, the avad kemar avad, or the avad kemor avad. Whoever wants to do like Rabbi Yehuda, gesund reheit, kol hakavod. Whoever wants to do like Rabbanan, gesund reheit, kol hakavod. Do it. Now this becomes a big machloket rishonim, whether or not one person could do both of them. Can one person sometimes do like one and sometimes do like the other one? So the Tosafot already here in Tashma, in the first Tosafot, asked this question. The Tosafot, the Rash, other people, they seem to indicate that you could choose what you want to do, but you have to be consistent. In other words, if you are a plag hamincha guy, if you always daven mincha before this and arvit after this, that means you're already davening arvit hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 minutes before sunset, then you always have to be consistent, and you can never daven mincha after plag hamincha. You have to be consistent. Make your mind, and you're a Rabbi Yehuda guy. You are a Chachamim guy, so you never daven arvit before sunset, before the 12th hour. You never daven arvit before that. Then you could daven mincha over here. The Meiri and the Ra'ah, other Rishonim, they disagree with this assertion. They say no. So long as today, every day is by itself. Today I could decide I am a Rabbi Yehuda guy, right? My wife is a little bit not in a good mood. Rabbi Yehuda it is, right? I'm going to daven early. I'm going to daven arvit early. I'm going to go home. It's sakarat nefashot. That's it. Yeah. But tomorrow, my wife is out of town. I could learn beforehand. So then tomorrow I could daven mincha after plak and arvit afterwards. No problem. As long as you don't contradict yourself within the same day, you're fine. What's considered contradicting? This area is the area of machloket. You cannot daven mincha and arvit during the period of this 1 hour and 15 minutes. Right? Because again, if you daven mincha,
and
right?
Arvit's got to be after.
Correct. Let's imagine if you would want to give an exact mashal to this, right? So today, Plaka Mincha is going to be 1736, right? 536 today is going to be the Plaka Mincha. And Shkia sunset is going to be 1853. So 6:53 is going to be Shkia. So how much time is there? So this is Shaul Zmaniot, right? We spoke about the fact that Shaul Zmaniot is not fit 60-minute hours. It depends on the season. Now we're very close to equinoxes because we're right before Sukkot, and therefore they're close to 1 hour and 15 minutes. This is 1 hour and 17 minutes, right? So in this 1 hour and 17 minutes, you can't both daven mincha and daven arvit. Because then what happens? When you daven mincha, you just declared halacha is like chachamim. And then when you daven arvit, you went to Rabbi Yehuda. What are you doing? So says the Meiri, so long as you don't do both of this in one day, you're good to go. Unlike the Rosh and other Rishonim who say you have to be consistent in your life, they say you don't have to be consistent in your life, but within the same day, you have to be consistent. That's the gist of it. Now, you have other Rishonim who say the minhag was Tarti de Satri in older time, the Ran, the Rashba, others. But nevertheless, this is the gist of what the Gemara says, that because we don't have halacha lo kemar, velo kemar, the avad kemar avad, or the avar kemar avad. Says the Gemara, a story 8 lines up, Rab ikla lebe geniva, vesali shel Shabbat be'erev Shabbat. Rav was hosted in the house of this fellow, one of the Chachamim's name was Geniva. And what he did was, he davened the Tfilah of Arvit of Shabbat be'erev Shabbat. On Friday evening, Friday afternoon, he davened the Tfilah of Shabbat. Vehava matzli Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba la'achore. And Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, who is a student of Rav, by the way, he was standing behind him and davening Shemona Esrei. Now the Gemara says, we learn a lot of halachot from this one piece of story. Rav finished his tefillah, and Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba had not finished his tefillah yet, so he did not pass in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. He waited for Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba to finish his Shemona Esrei, his lachash, before he passed in front of him, right? This is the story that we had. Rav was hosted in the house of this fellow, one of the Chachamim called Geniva. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was with him, his student, and Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba stood behind Rav. They were davening Shemona Esrei of Friday night, Shabbat, Arvit, before sunset. Friday before sunset. So the Gemara says, wow, we learn a lot of halachot from here. Shma mina tlat. You learn 3 halachot from this one story. A, Shma mina, Adam mitpalel shel Shabbat be'erev Shabbat. You could daven the tefillah of Friday night, Arvit, Shabbat, erev Shabbat. You could daven it in Friday evening before sunset. The Shema mina, who's halacha like, by the way? That would be like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Because before sunset, remember? Before sunset, already you are davening Arvit. In this hour and 15 minutes, you're davening Arvit. That's like Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, "V'shemamina mitpalel talmid achorei rabo." You know another halacha that the talmid, the student, could daven standing behind his rabbi, even though that's not really respectful because you're stopping him. He wants to step back. You're blocking him and so on. It's not really respectful. V'shemamina, also you learn asur lavor kineged hamitpalelin. it's asur to pass in front of somebody that is davening, which is halacha also. It's mentioned in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Bet, right? Many people are not aware or are not as careful about this halacha, but I read a story about Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was a Mesader Kiddushin at one of the weddings, and as he's coming in to go to the Ketuva room, there are people standing davening mincha. You know how it works. Every 5 minutes you have another minyan popping up in a busy wedding, and there's this bachorchi standing by the door of the Ketuva room, right next to the door, davening Shemona Esrei. So Rabbi Moshe comes and he stops going, and the one with him, he says, Chacham, what was we're late for Ketuva room. He says, don't you see there's a brick wall here, right? For him, it was a reality. A little kid is davening there. It's a brick wall, even though that really in halacha there are those who say, Rabbi Saleh Stern in Shelot Tshuvot B'Selach Chochma in Chelek Vav Siman Lamed and Lamed Aleph, he says that a person is not allowed to block a public domain. So if you stand in a public domain and you daven, it's mutar, he says, to pass in front of him. But the Maaseh, many poskim argue with that. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein did not want to rely on that. And he said, it's asur to go, like the Gemara says, in Chavzayit, in Masechet Berachot, it's asur to pass in front of somebody that is davening Shemona Esrei. Of course, in the shuls, this happens a lot. He needs a certain level of mindfulness to be careful not to pass in front of the mitpalel. And this Shaliach Tzibur also is included in this as well. Behind, according to halacha is fine. According to Zohar HaKadosh, Zohar is much more machmir in this halacha. We're going to get to this when we do the fifth perek by Chana, but Zohar HaKadosh holds that within 4 amot radius of the person that's davening, even behind them, it's like Shekhinah is shruya. There is disrespectful for Shekhinah if you pass through that domain. And in front of them, says the Zohar, Kim lo enav. It's not just 4 amot, 6 feet, but so long as they could still see it, it would be asur to pass in front of them. So that's Zohar HaKadosh, which is Mishnah Berurah, also brings this in Siman Kuf Bet. But nevertheless, this is the 3 halachot. These are the 3 halachot that we learn from the story of Rav. Now the Gemara is going to challenge these halachot. Says the Gemara, Mesaya le Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Da'amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, asur la'avor keneged ha'mitpalelin. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said this halakha that's asur to pass in front of someone that's davening. Fine, this is a support for that. Then the Gemara says, Eni, is that true? 3 lines up. Ve'ha Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi chalfi. Rabbi Ami and Rav Asi used to pass in front of people who daven. So now, so far, the Gemara has not told us how far. The Gemara just said it's asur. You learn from the story of Rav, that's asur to pass in front of someone that's davening, right? That's all the Gemara said. Did not give us a measurement, a shi'ur of how long and how far. Now the Gemara says, no. Rav Ami and Rav Asi, who used to pass in front of the mitpalelim, they passed in front of them farther than 6 feet. So the Gemara says, them also, they would never ever pass in front of a person that's davening within 6 feet, within their immediate surrounding of 4 amot. They would not also pass in front. They passed when it was farther than 4 amot, farther than 6 feet. Says the Gemara, now the Gemara challenges the second halach. I says, wait a second. Rabbi Yirmiyah is a Talmid of Rav. How in the world did Rabbi Yirmiyah stand behind Rav and daven? It's not respectful. Says the Gemara, last line. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, this is the Rav. Rav himself says the Gemara, Rav taught us a halacha, le'olam al yitpalel adam. A person cannot stand and daven lo keneged rabo velo achore rabo. He can't stand right next to your Rebbe and daven, and you can't stand behind him and daven. Why? Says Rashi, etzel rabo umar'e keilu hem shavim. Because you show, if you stand shoulder to shoulder next to a Rebbe, you show that we are kind of like, we are peers, we are friends, right? We are equals, and that's not respectful. You can't stand behind your Rebbe, because it's yuara. You show that he needs, when he has to step back, he needs to wait for me. So I'm bigger than him. So that's why it's not covered, says Rashi. So we learned this halakha that you can't stand next to your Rebbe, you can't stand behind your Rebbe. So how in the world was Rabbi Yirmiyah allowed to stand behind his Rebbe and daven? Says the Gemara, it's very different. Now, before we go through this answer, the Gemara says a bunch of other halachot also that we learned from Rab. With Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer HaMitpalel Achorei Rabo, we learned in the Braita that if you daven behind your Rebbe, Achorei Rabo, Ve'anoten Shalom Rabo, and if you say Shalom Aleichem to your Rebbe, Ve'hamachzir Shalom Rabo, or you answer Aleichem Shalom to your Rebbe, Ve'hacholek al yeshivato shel Rabo, and a person that opens up a yeshiva and starts teaching Torah without getting permission from his Rebbe, right? It's considered a disrespect. Ve'haomer davar shelo shama mipi Rabo, and a person that says a shmuah, something that he has not heard from his Rebbe, Gorem l'shchina shetistalek miYisrael. This is a disrespect to the Torah, and Shechina of HaKadosh Baruch Hu leaves Am Yisrael. That's pretty bad, right? 1 to 10, this is almost like 10. Like you're kicking out Hashem from the world. What did you do already? First of all, in it, we have two that's very strange. If you say Shalom to your Rebbe, your Shechina leaves, what does that mean? If you answer Shalom to your Rebbe, Shechina leaves, what does that mean? But let's answer first what the actual Braita means to say. Says the Gemara, Shani Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, the Talmid Chaver Hava. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was very different because Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was not a regular Talmid of Rav, but rather he was an equal Talmid. What does Talmid Chaver mean? This is a phrase in Shas. Talmid Chaver means a peer student. What does that mean? That means a person that's as big as the rabbi, but learned a thing or two from him. You know, David HaMelech learned one halakha from Achitofel, and he called him his Rebbe. The Mishnah says in Pekavol, you learn one thing from a person, you're hayav to respect them. They become, in some sense, your rabbi. But if person B is equal in chokhmah, in his level of Torah with person A, even though that he learned a thing or two from him, still is not his Talmid, his friend Talmid. So they're really equals. That halacha of not standing behind him does not apply to a Talmid Chaver. Or you could have a Talmid Chaver, rarely, but it does happen, that the Talmid is so talented that within a very quick time, he learns everything that the rabbi knows and he becomes like an equal to him. Even though that he learned much more than one halacha from him, but now their levels are very much equal. That's also considered Talmid Chaver. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was a Talmid Chaver to Rav, not a regular Talmid. So therefore, for him was mutar to stand and daven behind him. Now the Gemara is going to prove that from a different story of Rav, from the continuation of the same story from Rav and Rabbi Yirmiyah. But before that, let's study what the Tosafot say about this Shalom. Rashi and Tosafot both say, what do you mean if you say Shalom to your rabbi, the Shekhinah is going to leave? Well, you're not supposed to say Shalom to your rabbi. Says Rashi, says Tosafot, Shalom leRabo k'she'ar kol adam. If you use the same terminology and language that you say Shalom to other people, same terminology and language to your rabbi, that is the problem. K'she'ar kol adam, Shalom alecha, I say Shalom alecha or Shalom aleichem, right? That you're not allowed to do. The Gemara says that when you see your rabbi, you say Shalom alecha Rebbe or Shalom alecha Rebbe Umori. You use a different language of kavod, and therefore, if a person uses the same terminology to address their Rebbe that he would address other people, that is what the Gemara says is considered disrespect. But of course, you got to say Shalom, and you got to answer Shalom. It's just the language is a little bit different. In Hebrew, it would be Shalom alecha Rebbe or Shalom alecha Rebbe Umori, right? My teacher, my master. So that's really the difference. Says the Gemara, how do I know that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was a Talmid Chaver? He was an equal with Rav. How do I know that? Says the Gemara, from the language that he used to address Rav. In the same story, remember what was the story? They're both hosted by this Chacham called Geniva, and they davened Arvit of Shabbat when? Early, within this hour and 15 minutes, right? So the Gemara says, you know what? Afterwards, after they finished davening, you know what Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba told Rav? He told him, did you stop working? Did you stop melacha? In other words, it's still daylight, the sun is out, but you accepted Shabbat. Once you accept Shabbat early, can you work? No. So he asked him, said, did you stop working? And he addressed him with you. You don't address your Rebbe saying you, right? In Gemara, always when a student refers to a Talmid, he says more, master, my master, MR, more, right? Mister, master. It all comes from the Gemara. More. My master, has my master stopped working? That would be a student speaking, addressing to a rabbi. But he doesn't do that. The Gemara says, take a look at the language that he used. And that's why Rabbi Yirmiyah addressing Rav in that same story, he said to him, Mi badlat. Did you stop working that now you accepted Shabbat? And says the Gemara, he answered him, Rav answered Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, in badilna. Yes, I stopped working. And the Gemara says, Velo amar mi badilmar. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba did not address him as a Talmid would address his Rebbe, saying, Mi badilmar. Did my Rebbe stop working? Umi badil. The Gemara says, wait a second. Now that you said this, I understand. Fine, good answer. He was a Talmid Chaver. They were equals. Great. But wait a second. Rav, did he really stop working? I bring a story to you that Rav once accepted Shabbat early and he went to take a shower afterwards. Can you take a shower of hot water on Shabbat? Chas v'shalom, right? So says the Gemara, wait a second. Umi badil. V'hama Rav Avin, pam achad I saw, Rav Avin said, Hitpaler Rebbe shel Shabbat be'erev Shabbat. Rebbe once davened the tefillah of Shabbat on Erev Shabbat, that means within this hour and 15 minutes, he davened early, he took in Shabbat early, and then afterwards, v'nichnas lemerchatz, Rabbi went into a public bathhouse, v'yatza, and he came out, and he put his Shabbat clothing on, and he came out, and he started teaching Gemara, v'shana lan pirkin, and he taught us our halachot. And even after that, still was not Shkia. So you see from here that Rebbe accepted Shabbat, davened Arvit, then he said, guys, wait 1 second. He went to the public bathhouse, and then he came back and taught us Halakha is still not sunset. So you see from here, says the Gemara, that he didn't stop working after accepting Shabbat by Arvit. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Hahu denichtas lehazia v'kodem gezerah hava. Says he did not go in to take a bath, a hot bath. That would be asur on Shabbat, right? The Gemara talks about this in Masachet Shabbat, the Yud Chet, the Mem, and the Shulchan Aruch actually paskins this in Siman Shin Chaf Vav in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. Now, why am I saying this? Because sometimes many, especially Hasidim, they are machmir to go to mikveh. Even Ben Ish Chai writes this Shabbat morning, right? There's a concept of Tosefet Neshama, the Bechinat Hayom. And also some women have to go to mikveh on Friday night. So can you bathe in hot water on Shabbat? That's a gezerah. Normally speaking, the Shulchan Aruch says you cannot bathe in hot water. So is mikveh any different than a regular bath? That becomes a massive machloket. Because of this, Chacham Obadia says better to go in Ben Hashmashot to mikveh for women than to go after Seder Kochavim, even though that in regular night we would absolutely not do that. Absolutely not do that, right? But Chavadia says better to do that than go to a hot bath because that's a full-fledged Yisur Darabanan. So that's Asur. He did not go do that. You know what he did? He went to sit and get a sauna, right? Back then also they would go to the bathhouse to sit there to just be mezia, to sweat out and basically sauna, right? That's what and that is a gezerah that happened in the time of Rabbi. Right now, even that's asur because people go there and then next thing you know, they forget and they go to take a bath, and therefore Chazal made it asur to even go lehazia, to sit there, even to just sweat out. That also is asur, but that is a rabbinic enactment that happened in the time of Rabbi, and this story happened before the Gezerah. So therefore, yes, you have to stop, says the Gemara, the work when you accept early Shabbat, you have to stop working. But at the same time, this story was not working, was going to sit there to just sweat, and that's mutar mikaradin. Chazal made it asur in the time of Rabbi, and this story was before they made the Gezerah. Bezat Hashem will continue this in the days to come.
Well, shouldn't we, right after Mariv, go straight home and have